There's not going to be Harry Potter, and there's not going to be Rick Riordan. I think those are really the big two that I'm not going to mention. Welcome again to Top 5 Wednesday, and this week's topic are your top 5 children's, and for me also including sort of middle grade, books. And I think it is important to try and include a list that doesn't have Harry Potter or, Percy Jackson's and the billions of other Rick Riordan novels, because we know those. They're pretty big. I don't think we need to mention them again. Oh, I'm also not going to mention His Dark Materials because frankly, I don't think they're children's books. I think those are adults' books that can be technically read by everybody, and I know that Pullman, I think, has said on numerous occasions he did not write them as children's books. So yeah, Harry Potter, Riordan, Pullman, those three are not going to be included. I'm going to be bringing you something else. Let's go. Therithmatist by Brandon Sanderson. I think this gets shelved in YA, but I do think it is kind of a borderline middle grade YA. Of the YA I've read from Brandon Sanderson, this is one I could easily hand to an 11-year-old and I think they'd enjoy it. It's the story of a boy who wants to be a arithmetist. He wants to have this power essentially where you draw chalk circles and things happen as a result. Unfortunately, he can't. He doesn't have the talent. He knows all the theory. He can perfectly draw all of the diagrams. He just doesn't have the magic to go with it. What I really like about this book is the magic system. For me, Brandon Sanderson has always come up with very interesting magic systems, and clearly he puts a lot of thought into them. This one is sort of just like D&D meets math, and there's something about it that was so fascinating. And what I thought was most interesting is that I listened to it and it still made sense to me. And this is a book that kind of depends on you being able to see the symbols that are drawn because it does involve chalk drawings. And yet I listened and totally understood what was going on. And that I think speaks to Sanderson's ability in telling a very streamlined, very easy to digest story. It's fun, it's not particularly complicated, it's got some good antagonists, some creepy moments, and again, this is a book that's shelved in YA, but frankly, I think you could give to younger readers and they'd be fine. I can't think of too many things where they would struggle in reading this story. Again, it's very straightforward, it's just good, kind of clean fun. I guess that's just why I like it. The Magisterium series by Cassandra Clare and Holly Black. This is a really great co-writing team. Holly Black and Cassandra Clare I know are friends, and they have kind of similar writing styles at times, especially in the way they often write dialogue. So this was sort of a match made in heaven for me. It's reading it and going, oh yeah, like, of course these two are writing together, it just fits. This is going to start very reminiscent of Harry Potter. If you have a young boy who tests to go into a magic school, has two friends, they have adventures, there's a Dark Lord who was thought to be dead but probably isn't, shenanigans are going on at school, but it's also all in the Luray Caverns up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which I've been to, so I totally love that it's set down in the caverns and it creates this very interesting school world while you're there. There's an awful lot of it where I go, it has the hallmarks of that genre of fantasy. Harry Potter didn't really define these hallmarks. It, in a way, perfected them and I think showed you probably the best version of it. But these two writers said, okay, let's take some of those hallmarks of that boarding school fantasy type and we'll go in there and then we're gonna start bending, we're gonna start playing, we're gonna start putting our little spins and twists on it. And as the series has gone on, it has really become its own original thing. I do know that I think the first book will draw a lot of parallels to Harry Potter with people. And for me, I'm like, yeah, I see basic narrative parallels, but then everything else in it is different. And it gets more different as you keep going. For me, it's fun, there's snarky characters, it's a good ride, you don't have to think too hard when you read it, it's just good fun. The Fairyland series by Catherine M. Valente. The first novel you've probably heard of. It's entitled The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. Yes, that took me a couple takes to get right. This series tells the story of a young girl named Wednesday who is one day picked up by the green wind on his leopard of many heirs. This is gonna sound very strange. This girl named Wednesday is taken to Fairyland and she has to travel her way through Fairyland in order to get back out and like defeat the kind of evil queen-esque character. All the hallmarks you'd think of a fairy story, but way more creative. Valente's writing style is like music. It has this wandering, meandering way to it that is so enchanting that you can't help but get swept up in the book. My one caveat is that it's really hard to get back into it if you put it down. And I did find that as I was following the series as it got published, it sometimes became harder and harder for me to remember everything that happened because it is a fairy story. It is very wandering and meandering, and there's these sort of Alice in Wonderland like randomness to it that at times can be a little jarring. But it is this very enchanting, creative story that I do understand it will be a kind of you like it or you don't. Like, if you can't bank on the writing style, you will probably not like this series. But I personally love it. I just thought it was so wildly enchanting and creative, and I want an animated movie out of the first one. It would have to be animation. You can't do it in live action. The Bartimaeus series by Jonathan Stroud. This is an initial trilogy that begins with the Amulet of Samarkand, continues with the Golem's Eye, concludes with Ptolemy's Gate. There is also a fourth book, which is a prequel entitled The Ring of Solomon. I do recommend, despite the fact it's a prequel, reading the initial trilogy before you go to The Ring of Solomon. So the Bartimaeus trilogy is an alternate history urban fantasy which takes place in a London that is run by magicians. And I mean, like, they run the government. This is a alternate history kind of, again, urban fantasy that really feels just sort of realistic. It's just that there are magicians, and that just sort of affects society because they control the government. They are magicians because they are able to, make potions or whatever, but they mainly can summon spirits from the other side. Jinni, Afrits, Marids, Imps, all of these characters, and it begins in the Amulet of Samarkand with a Jinni by the name of Bartimaeus being summoned by a 12-year-old boy named Nathaniel. Now, what continues from there is an incredible story. I love these books for many reasons, but something I really want to highlight is first off the use of footnotes. The first book at least alternates between the point of views of Nathaniel and Bartimaeus, and especially when you're in Bartimaeus' perspective, you get these constant footnotes. These footnotes are essentially snarkentary. It is Bartimaeus cracking jokes and making comments about things that he's telling you at the bottom of the page, and it is so delightfully entertaining that it just cracks me up. And what I love is that this series is a pretty dark series. It's very serious and it's very bittersweet. The idea of summoning spirits from the other side, the way you have to bind them in a contract, how careful you have to be, that really, they are slaves, they know it, and they hate it, and they will take any chance to get back at a magician who summoned them improperly. And it's a wonderful, amazing story. It is surprisingly mature as you read it. I think if you read it when you're older, you get a lot more of the kind of social political commentary that goes on in there, and it's fascinating. And again, just a lot of fun, especially because Bartimaeus is so funny, and that makes him likable, even though most of the time he should be kind of unlikable because he's a bit of a dick. And the same with Nathaniel. This kid at 12 years old is ruthless. He is absolutely ruthless, and his character arc from the first book to the third book is astonishing. High recommend for the whole thing. The humdinger of them all, The Guardians of Childhood by William Joyce. I cannot praise this series enough and encourage more people to read it, because this series completely breaks my heart on numerous levels. The basic premise of these books being that you are following the characters of Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and the Sandman, Nightlight, the Man in the Moon, the young girl who will eventually become Mother Goose, someone who eventually becomes Jack Frost, all of them as they fight against this character called Pitch, the Nightmare King. And you are learning essentially a whole new mythology, origin stories of all these characters, and it is so mind-bogglingly creative that it makes me want to scream, because I go, I can't even think of something this creative. Not only that, William Joyce illustrates all of the books. Now, if you're not familiar with William Joyce, he was a big deal kind of over at Disney and DreamWorks for character designs and creative concepts. He had a television series called Roly Poly Oly. He won an Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film for the fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore, which was a fantastic short. He also did a picture book of it, which is amazing. And the best part about the Guardians of Childhood series is it is predominantly chapter books, with a fifth book coming out either, I believe, later this year or next year. I'm not prepared. I'm so not emotionally prepared. But there are also picture books to go with it, and those are stunning. Again, he illustrates them, and his illustrations are gorgeous. If you really want to see neat, kind of steampunk-esque illustrations in middle grade and children's books, you go to William Joyce, because that's what he excels at. And I just cannot get over how beautiful the storytelling is in this series, because the characters are great, the story is really fun, it reads really fast because it's put in middle grade. It's not meant for a very older audience, but I think there is an element of when you're older and you're reading it, it's all the more just sort of sad and wonderful because it makes you feel like a kid again. It brings back this kind of feeling you haven't had since before when you were a kid, and you know, Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and all these characters were very real to you. And I mean, I wish I had these as a kid. They didn't exist when I was a kid. I wish I'd had them. I have them when I was an adult, and I'm so happy that I have them. It is also one of these series I recommend. You cannot get an ebook. You cannot get an audiobook. You have to buy the hard copy. They are so beautiful that it hurts. It's... oh, I can't talk about this series enough. It's so good. If you've taken anything away from this, really, Guardians of Childhood and Bartimaeus are the two that I'm just like, forever. Please, you need these in your life. Thanks for watching me ramble today. If you'd like to see more from me, go ahead and click that button with my face on it. It'll take you to my channel where I ramble about a whole lot of different things. Got some thoughts of your own? Go ahead and leave them down in the comments. And make sure that if you want to see more ramblings from me, you click that little subscribe button. That's it for me today, you guys, so until next time, cheers.